please help yourselves to drinks and treats and don't be shy. Please do in. There's loot just through that door in the back right hand corner, turn right. And obviously this door here is the nearest fire exit. So I'm going to introduce our musical performances. We've got Lady Lalu coming up. After that we're going to have a poem from Mandy, who's another member of the Frome Collective, and we've got Nicola Clark here, who's going to sing us a song. Okay? And then we'll have a little break, and time to look at the exhibitions and put your answers on the wall. It's already been very engaged over there, it's really nice to see. Thank you everyone for joining in. And there's some really gorgeous stories at the back. One reminder, please, to just turn off your phones or put them on silent, whatever you prefer, and then we'll get started.
Hello lovely people, I'm Jo, this is Will, my partner. We are the musical duo Lady Lalu. That's us on socials if you want to find us, it's Lady L-A-L-U. It's just sort of a mandatory thing to say these days. Yeah, I'm a member of the Frome Collective as well. And in preparation for this event, this song was actually written especially for this event, inspired by the radical approach of the lineage of clothing. So the song was written as if to think there was a dress passed down through the matrilineal lineage, and it had been going for thousands of years.
But if you wear it, then please repair it, so your granddaughters can know that dress. That dress. That dress. That dress. There's a dress I'd like to wear again, again and again and again and again. The pride of my motherline sewed in the hem, repaired again and again and again and again, again and again and again and again and again and again and again.
This is a poem written that was inspired by my mum's clothes, and my mum's been really ill in hospital and she's going to go into a care home and she's had delirium, so I think that's why I'm feeling really emotional after Joe's song. But here we go, and everything in it is true apart from I did not go on a date with Johnny Daniels. He was my brother's best friend and I never wanted to go on a date with him, but he's lovely. And the shoes got eaten by woodworm, so hence I'm not wearing the shoes. Okay, this is called Fledgling. I coveted my mum's platform sandals, polka-dotted red and white. What a sight I would have looked, 10 years old with skinny legs, a colt shod with Shire horses' shoes. I coveted my mum's psychedelic evening dress and the style with which she wore it, a 70s goddess out on the town with trendy tiddlywink earrings. I coveted my mum's Moroccan kaftan, white, exotic, conjuring Saharan sheikhs riding through desert storms. I wear my mum's Spanish dress, embroidered with roses, red and pink and golden, and I put on my red wedges, and like a fledgling, I fly from the nest on a date with Johnny Daniels.
I'm Nicola, and my connection is with Everyone Needs Pockets. This is a song about well, I call it my polemic against the perils of polyester on this planet. So I'm afraid it's quite light-hearted and yet very serious. And I think probably if I just start, you'll get it quite clearly. So here we go. They're in the whales and the quails, they're in the birds and the bees, they're in the bats and the cats and the flies and the fleas. Oh, they're in the dogs and the frogs, the rivers and the trees, they're in a cow, in a sow, in the storm on a breeze. They're everywhere, they're everywhere, they're everywhere. Well, I'm singing of the dire effects of polyester on our health and sex and acrylic textile, how it wrecks the ecology, our biology, fertility, virility, the general viability of the planet. Well, fast fashion, that's the boogey bear, the urge to find cheap clothes to wear, call it easy care, but it isn't fair on the fish, on the birds of the air, on the polar bears, on the ice caps of our planet. they're never quite right. They're a tad too bright, too loose, or too tight. Ditch the lot, shop again. Woo, never mind the strain and drain on the planet. Well, you can read, research those facts on surplus clothes in bales and sacks. Well, they end up lying in piles and stacks, visible from outer space, on the sides of the mountain, in the sands of the desert, on the beaches of our planet. This stuff takes years to disintegrate, and when it does, it may be far too late for microplastics. They infiltrate the rivers of our blood, our brains and our livers, the water and the earth and the air, life givers of our planet. Well, there's so much to do. Who is gonna do it if we wreck this planet? Who can renew it? But if everyone would do their part, live their life ruled by the heart, each little step could go a long way. So don't despair, start today. Well, you could choose the clothes you wear for quality of cloth, then take care, learn to repair, and patch that tear. Be individual, let people stare. They may not get it, what do you care? You're saving the planet. Yeah, they may not see it. You can declare, I'm taking care of the planet. They may not know it, but you are aware. You're loving the planet. You're taking care of the planet. You're saving the planet. Thank you.
Thank you to all our performers. We've got some interesting little thoughts on each of those little performances, I think, for us to have a little ponder on. We're going to have a little break now, pop to loo, have a little drink, and we'll gather again just before 8 for our panel discussion. Hazel is our chair, she's at the back, she's going to be talking you through why we're here, who we are, what we're going to do, and hopefully some radical solutions to the quite multiple crises that we're in at the moment. So please stick around and join us for that panel conversation in just before 8 o'clock. Thank you.
There was an article that went around EMP the other day about charity shops being used as bins. I don't work in one, but I have experienced that being in one the other week, and the lady came in with a massive bag of Shein, I never know how to say that. Like the fast fashion company.
Oh, Shein, S-H-E-I-N.
Yes. And she brought it in, and she was chatting to the volunteer lady, and she said, "Oh, I bought this, and I just thought I don't really want it, so I just thought I'd bring it to you guys because it's easier than sending it back."
If you were there to be interested in
I get fed up with my own music, the sound of my own voice, so it's quite nice to,
Hello? That's better. Don't need to shout at you all. Okay, thank you for joining us again after the break. We're now going to go into our panel discussion. Welcome to this part of the evening. We wanted to define for you what radical means. Now, the literal dictionary definition, as displayed by my able assistant here. So radical, especially of change or action, is relating to or affecting the fundamental nature of something, far-reaching or thorough. Make that what you will. Thank you, Rosa. So joining us today for panel discussion, we have Liz, and we have Amelia, and we have Sara. And I probably should have said your surnames as well, shouldn't I? Liz Parker, Amelia Twine, and Sara Arnold. And if we could start with you guys just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do. Who would like to go first? Should we start with you, Sara?
So I originally have a design background. I studied fashion design at Central St Martin's, wanting to be next Alexander McQueen or something. When I graduated, I realised that, well, if I was going to set up a company, I was then going to be persuading people to buy more and more things that they don't really need. And this led me to going to Imperial College and studying innovation, entrepreneurship and management. I started a fashion rental company out of that, renting out second-hand clothing, but really trying to find really beautiful things, really special things. But then still felt that I was still in the same kind of growth paradigm. And something really drastic needed to happen. About the same time, Extinction Rebellion started, so I dove in, and this led me to coordinating their actions that were directed at the fashion industry. And we did several kind of big protests outside Fashion Week. Then lockdown happened, and like everybody else, we went into a period of reflection. And I really felt that the conversation about degrowth and fashion needed a lot more exploration. So I started a group called Fashion Act Now, which is really just opening up a space for those conversations. And this has led us to kind of coining this term defashion to describe this relationship between fashion and degrowth, essentially saying, you know, we need to fundamentally reimagine the whole thing, we need to defashion. And recently we've started our Common Market as a platform for community-based or commons-based fashion clothing and textile practices. So that's kind of one of our solutions to the problem. Solutions is the right word, probably not the right word. And I probably talk too much already, so I'll pass it on.
You're fine, if you want to pass it on to Amelia. Hi, so I'm Amelia. It's such a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I run Sustainable Fashion Week, which is mostly what the companies, the name of the company is known by, but the company's actually called A Single Thread, and we're going to transition later this year towards that being what we're known for. So Single Thread is the company, and it runs Sustainable Fashion Week, which is a programme of activity across the UK, which joins together action that's already taking place in different regions and brings it together in this kind of mycelium-like network to amplify what everyone's doing and show connectedness across the country. And show, demonstrate, celebrate, showcase the action that is being taken by people at a grassroots level to change fashion. In brief, how I got there, because otherwise I'll go on. I grew up on an organic farm, so come from a farming background, have been very inspired by nature forever and ever, worked in food initially, and then did a sidestep into fashion when I was bored working in food with no background in fashion at all, so I know nothing really about the industry and the supply chain. which in some ways is quite useful because my naivety, I think, means that I can see solutions as being quite simple in ways that people in the industry think are very, very complex. We can't possibly change X, Y, and Z, whereas my naivety just goes, yeah, we can. Like, it's possible. Similarly to Sara, I set up initially a online women's wear retail platform, looking at selling sustainable clothing as a way of sort of highlighting style and sustainability in fashion, and then quickly realised that it was inaccessible to most people, and did a lot of stuff with extension rebellion at the same time. And out of that came this sort of desire to make the story of sustainable fashion accessible and relevant to as many people as possible, not just to a sort of small niche. So Sustainable Fashion Week and Sustainable Thread looks to do that. It looks to look at all the different sustainable fashion actions which aren't necessarily buying something new that's different, and actions that are obviously accessible to everyone in different ways.
Thanks. Hi everybody. I feel really honoured to be on the platform with these two and Frome Wardrobe Collective and Everybody Needs Pockets, just some brilliant organisations. And I've been around for a long time in this field since the late 90s. So I actually applied for a job at Labour Behind the Label. I didn't get it, so it's a workers' rights organisation, but through them got a reused envelope, badly photocopied job description for an organisation that worked on bananas, so kind of a food fashion connection. I worked at Bananas for 5 years before transitioning to the sister organisation, Labour Behind the Label, which is part of the Clean Clothes campaign. And so I work with the Clean Clothes campaign as a freelancer. I'm an associate member. I've been doing that for many years, and I'm currently working on just transition issues, so really where workers' rights and climate meet. But when I was thinking about how to introduce myself, I also wanted to name some people and something to do with wildlife as well. And I got reminded the other day that years ago I ran a conference and I had an empty chair, and I'd totally forgotten about it, and it just felt like the really appropriate place to bring this empty chair back in, because there's people missing, right? There's always people missing in these kind of spaces, and I've worked with garment workers and their activists for a long time. I just want to, and banana workers, and I want to name a few of them that have really inspired, influenced, and who have also been killed or had threats in their line of work. So when I very first started, in the very first week at Banana Link, a trade unionist in Colombia called Cesar Herrera was murdered in his office. Not long after that, a group of trade unionists in Guatemala were rounded up, taken to the radio station, forced to resign from the union, and have been in hiding ever since. I worked really closely on garment factory fires in Pakistani enterprises in Tazreen. The enterprises were 249 killed, in Tazreen was 212. And then not long after that, also worked on Rana Plaza. This is where the hairs on my arms go up. So there was over 1,138 people were killed in Rana Plaza. And I've got a portrait of the last person to be pulled out, the last surviving person to be pulled out of Rana Plaza, who is Reshma Begum. But also there's plenty of people that are alive and who, Reshma of course is still alive, but there's activists that also inspire me. We've got Iris Mungia from the Honduran Trade Union, we've got Kalpona Akhtar in Bangladesh, we've got Ina Kazaldaris, who's one of the founders of the Clean Clothes campaign, Anton Marcus, who's been fighting for decades. He's got such a brilliant union in Sri Lanka, organised lots of workers. Next have just closed down their only unionised factory in Sri Lanka. So I'm going to call on you in a bit to put some pressure on Next to get that factory reopened. Okay. There was one other thing, can I have another moment? So 2015, not long after Rana Plaza, I was basically broken by the deaths and this violence that I've been working with, and I did a lot of nature-based work, and that's really brought me for the kind of almost for the first time really in connection with with that more than human world. And so I also want to name wolves that were extirpated, like basically killed off in Britain, partly because of the wool trade. And with wildlife, you can't say exactly that it's the reason, fashion was the reason, but beavers, or the birds that were put onto hats that led to the formation of the RSPB, the snow leopard whose habitat is being destroyed in Mongolia. All of these species, the Buriganga River in Bangladesh, which has been killed. There are so many places and people that I could name, but that's more than I think I've got time for it. Thank you.
Thank you all. That's very powerful. The empty chair is certainly a very powerful technique. We can bear that in mind as we're having the discussion this evening. I actually forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Hazel, I am part of the Frome Wardrobe Collective, and I am also a member of Everyone Needs Pockets. Just very briefly, the Frome Wardrobe Collective, in case you've not come across us before, we are the second iteration of the Frome Wardrobe Collective. Unfortunately, the first was very affected by COVID. But we revived it, we brought back the clothes swaps. I can't remember how many we've done now, 4, 5, many. And the next one, Date for Your Diaries, is the 27th of September, and it's going to be taking place as part of Sustainable Fashion Week this year. Okay, so now we know each other a little bit better. My first question to you all, or second question to you all, is what is going on? In your words, why is the clothing and textile industry such a problem? Perhaps we can start with this. There's too much and it's all bad, basically. Most of the clothing we buy these days is made of plastic. It's coated in toxic chemical coatings, dyes are toxic, processes are harming garment workers, habitats, rivers, communities, and we make way too much. So I think British Fashion Council said, I think it was last year, there's enough clothing on the planet at the moment for the next 6 generations of people. So perhaps 100 years, 120 years. That's a lot of clothing for a lot of people. So we don't need to make anything else, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean that's simply it, isn't it? I made some notes about that we're choking in the amount of clothing that's in existence. And I was trying to think of a good metaphor, and this is something that I've been playing with for a while, that fashion's almost like an invasive species that's just taken over everything and just creating no space, no oxygen for anything else, no other fashion systems to come up. Yeah, maybe that's what I need to say. That's how I see it. Maybe we could just play with that metaphor a bit.
How should I put this? I think we now have a clothing system that has become completely intertwined with a growth-based economic system, which is all about growth for growth's sake. Not all growth is bad, but growth for growth's sake is bad. And leading us to very bad places. And to feed this growth, we have ever-expanding sacrifice zones, and that means sacrifice zones where you're extracting huge amounts of resources. Also the sacrifice of human labour, mostly in the global south. And then what often gets forgotten is the sacrifice of other cultures, as we've created this huge, dominant, monolithic culture, clothing culture, that we call fashion, that has spread through the world, eroding and erasing other cultures and windows into other ways of being on this planet. And we actually really need those alternatives. We need to be able to kind of be able to see that there are other ways of doing things, and we're destroying that. So I guess I see the problem as kind of needing to interrogate this system of growth. The system that is kind of, maybe I should stop there, I don't know, we're going to go. But you know, it's a colonial system, it's now a neo-colonial system, neoliberal system. We have countries in the global south, 54 countries that are in debt crisis. 48 of those are spending more on debt than they spend on health and education combined. And so they're in a system where they have to grow in order to pay their debts. And that then means that they're producing cheap clothes. So maybe I'll leave it there and we'll talk about it again.
Thank you, Sara. I love your passion for talking about that side of things. I put some very powerful points there. What fascinates me about that quote that is often said about the 6 generations worth of clothing, and when we looked that up, and it's actually from 2019. 2019. So here we are, how many years? 6 years later. So I dread to think how many generations we can now clothe 6 years down the line. It must be more than 6, but it's just, horrific in the first place. Okay, so you guys have mentioned identified some of the big issues. What do you think are the current barriers that we face in changing these things to improve upon these issues?
For me, this comes down to power and politics. And sometimes I think in conversations around fashion and sustainability, we can shy away from those issues of power and politics. It is about money, it is about who has power and where we claim power. And who has access to having their voice heard. And we're seeing an increasing amount of repression of people. Well, what I think is really interesting actually is that what we're seeing at the moment is repression occurring in North America, in Europe, and basically that's how so many countries around the world have been living for so long. We're just facing it now. So you won't be surprised if any of you know the Clean Clothes Campaign or the work of its member organisations, which I should have mentioned is a network of 250 organisations, more or less, working on labour rights in garment manufacture. So one of our core focuses around organising workers into trade unions as a means to gain power. And for me, that the union busting that we see, that repression, whether it's through violence or through other more subtle ways, is really, really key, which is why I feel like it's so important that we take action on what Next has just done and closing that factory in Sri Lanka. Because we have to make it really clear that the powerful change has to come from the bottom up. And I'm also very aware that the global manufacturing system is not what we want to see in the long term, but it exists right now and people need those protections right now, whilst at the same time we can bring in other change. So for me, freedom of association and the barriers to it are really, really critical, alongside the economics of the system, which mean that workers aren't paid anything like a living wage. Thanks.
We at Single Thread, we ask our community every year, both those who are hosting activities as part of our programmes and those who then attend. And we try to get as many responses as possible because that, I hate to use the word, but that data is really, really valuable to us, even as such a small organisation. And when we say, what are the barriers to becoming more sustainable in your fashion habits, and we find people have the same responses, and the first one is always cost. And there are, and then there's time, not knowing where to look, not being able to trust what fashion brands say. There are loads of other reasons as well. Cost is always number one in terms of the percentage of how many people have identified it. And I always think this is so interesting because, as we've just seen, that there is enough second-hand clothing to keep us all going. Broadly, second-hand clothing is cheaper. I mean, it is, if you go to charity shops, it is getting more expensive, and that's another problem. But broadly, it's cheaper. So why do people, what's that gap? So people think it's too expensive to become more sustainable, and yet the options to be sustainable are not only already in their wardrobes, but even if they're not in their wardrobes, they are, closer than they think and cheaper than they think, if not free a lot of the time. So what's going on there? And is it just that people need to be, I hate this word and I don't like using it, but educated? I don't like the dynamic that's implicit in that. Is it that we need to share the knowledge between us more? Or is it actually that there's something even bigger, which is that human systems are broken? If we look at how we operated years and years ago in terms of how we had communities, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, which was sort of enmeshed in our immediate hyper-local community, those systems are broken. And so when we say when people feel they don't have the money or the time to make changes in their lifestyles, let's say, it's so linked to how everything in our lives is just unmanageable. We're all working too hard. Everything, we were all talking about this before we came on stage, life is mad right now. It's mad in the world, it's mad personally. Everyone's working too hard, everyone's struggling financially, or most of the people I know. So the whole system is broken. It's broken economically, it's broken in terms of globalization, it's broken personally, individually, communally. And there are loads of solutions to that. Some are easy, some are complicated, but I think this word radical is really important because I think that's where we need to start, is that we need to overturn everything we understand about fashion and everything we understand about what is sustainable fashion and how we can access it, because it isn't overturning. It's like we're not looking here at the fashion production system, we're looking at it here at hyper-local solutions which really connect us to our communities and bring about a new sense of belonging.
Well, I mean, there's already a lot of really important points brought up. So I'm wondering what I can add to that. It is about power structures, so that's kind of the geopolitical power structures, but also the power structures within corporations. This lack of economic democracy. I think, we vote for our politicians, but we have very little power in how our economy is actually functioning. And I think we should have power within that. We should have power within corporations. Garment workers obviously should have more power, but we need to be questioning how that can happen in lots of different places. How we can have economic sovereignty and economic democracy. But then I think there's this other thing that, how does that then play into our culture? And I think we have, I'll go back to kind of the degrowth actually started with academics that were questioning our social imaginary, how this ideology of growth was affecting our collective imaginary. And they said that we all kind of have this imperialist imaginary that's ingrained in us, that we are now all we feel this pressure to compete with one another. And we need to kind of break out of that. We need cooperation rather than competition, collectivism rather than individualism. So I'd say there's this added barrier of how we see the world and how we can see the world differently.
Thank you. I love the fact that you guys have mentioned.
What is that system that seeing fashion not as an aesthetic or trend, but as this whole encompassing system. And what is the paradigm that exists in? What are the kind of unstated assumptions that are made, such as a company needs to profit, that the shareholders need to be paid their share, that this, growth for growth's sake. And that takes us to a point of thinking about how do we dismantle the system rather than just tame the system. And for us, then that means we need to build alternatives. And that's really led us to an exploration of the commons and how that relates to fashion. Can fashion exist within commons-based structures? So instead of thinking, what do we produce in order to create a profit, we think, what does our community need, and how can our community work together and collaborate to reach our shared goals? And then I come to this question of how can the commons be a way to resist the systems? I think resistance starts with community, and I'll leave it there.
Excuse me. So I think a single thread. I think we're, in terms of how our approach is radical, is that it links broadly to the last question, what we were saying, but it is around power, and it is around not giving the power back to the consumer, but highlighting that the power already lies in our hands. That we, as a collective group, in this room, in this region, county, country, we have all the power as the people. But it's just very, very hard to see how to use that sometimes when we're so exhausted and working so hard. But that it's trying to show that find ways of showing that power is in existence and that we can harness it. But trying to do that in a way, I suppose, how do I put this, trying to show that power, but also do it in a way which again is accessible. So we're always trying to connect with the broadest audience as possible, which is impossible. Like, people keep saying, who's your target audience? And I'm like, it's everyone. And we do need to narrow it down a bit, but it's trying to show that radical harnessing of collective power in the community, but doing it in a way, with the right language, which is inspiring to people rather than a bit frightening. So not sounding too radical, but underneath it having that radical edge. Does that make sense?
I think, just following on from what you're both saying, I think it really shows that there are different radical approaches and it's all needed. I don't think it is like one radical approach that's going to, transform us to something completely different. So, actually reading from that as well, do you know the work of Joanna Macy? If any of you come across her work, a few people, I really recommend that you look her up. She's comes to the end of her life right now, but an incredible, beautiful woman, and she talks about this thing of the great turning. I'm aware that I nearly always talk about the work of Joanna Macy because for me it's such a great framework. And what she says is there's three parts of the great turning. One of them is stopping the worst from happening. So that's how I see the kind of workers' rights activists, is that actually right now, today, there are people who aren't paid enough, who are working in terribly dangerous conditions, who are exposed to flooding and heat to such a degree like it's unimaginable. We have to do something. We have to, do something to keep that at bay. And at the same time, we need these transformative new ways and new systems. And so Joanna Macy talks about creating new ways of doing things. And then there's also this creating new mindsets as well, and transforming the language and the way that we think about things. And I think we need this radical approach in all of those three areas. In terms of the work of the Clean Clothes campaign, which, as I say, is this broad network, but there's one example that I want to share with you, which has been really powerful and been really radical, which is the Accord on Fire and Building Safety, which is what we call an enforceable brand agreement. Basically, it holds brands legally responsible along with employers, and it involves the governments as well, to improve fire and building safety in Bangladesh. So after all the factory fires and the building collapses and boiler explosions, this agreement was signed. It had been ready to be signed for a number of years before. It had been worked on for something like nearly 10 years. And then when Rana Plaza collapsed, these over 1,000 people died, it got signed. And it's radically transformed safety in Bangladesh. And so that's just an example of, the power of consumer activism, trade unions, seeing the mechanisms where we can actually put some control on companies and really bring them together. It's not voluntary. It's not relying on them to say they're going to do something but not delivering. But it's about real change.
Thank you. It's funny that you mentioned the work of Joanna Macy. It's we love her in the Frome Wardrobe Collective, and it's actually something that we took into consideration when we were planning this panel discussion. So it's really, really interesting that you bring her up. I love the idea, and this for me has partly come from her work, but also from the work of Katie Tregidden, I think her name is, of being radically grateful, of rejecting the idea that we need more, and instead saying, no, I'm happy with what I've got. Thank you very much. Okay, so how are we doing for time?
Let's do the future question.
Okay. It's always going to be the case that we're always going to want to talk more about this. Okay, so we're going to skip forward a little bit, guys, if that's okay with you. We're going to play an imagination game. We want you guys to take us into the future. Not too far, it needs to be tangible. It wants to feel, as though we can just about touch it, but it's not too space agey. So speaking, if you can, in the present tense, can you take us to 2035, just 10 years in the future? Policies changed, culture has shifted. What does work now look like for you, and how did we get there? Amelia, perhaps you could start us off. Such a good question. I think what I would love to see from my organisation and what we're doing in 10 years is that we're redundant and we're not needed anymore. And that's, for me, that would be a measure of success if a single thread has done its bit to help shift citizens in how they buy and consume, wear, care and dispose of fashion, and that we're on a different path, and we're obviously, I want everyone to buy second hand, I want people to repair. I want hyper-local solutions which are community-led, and I would love investment in local, regional, bioregional clothing production. So looking at what we can grow and raise in the UK in terms of plant fibres and animal fibres, and then create garments from local communities as well. So it's partly idealistic and partly very, very possible. But I think if a measure of success for me in my career in 10 years' time for our organisation is that we don't exist.
So, in 2035, I spent just one day a week doing wage-based work. And I'm paid a universal basic income. This wage-based work is to provide essential services. And the rest of the time, I spend doing things for my community. And this could be running a fashion hub in which we are growing fibres locally. We are reviving old skills, but also innovating in our own ways. We are mending, repairing, upcycling. But then how did we get here? It's a really good question. And I'm not sure how we got here, but I think the question that I always have is, you know, do we need some huge disaster in order for the change to happen? But disasters are happening all the time. So how big does it need to be to get people to notice? So I think there's a big question mark there. Do we need a revolution? But what does that revolution look like? Do we need to lock people in COP until they actually do what's needed? You know, there needs to be a debt cancellation. The global south needs to be given its productive sovereignty. We need to stop this unequal exchange where, you know, that allows us to extract all this resources and labour from the global south. But yeah, I think, you know, 2035 can be somewhere where actually we have a pretty good life and we live in harmony with the planet. And we, we're no longer exploiting. But yeah, the question mark is how.
So in 2035 I'm in Frome with all of you. And all of this is happening, all of it, every single bit of it. But you also can't buy fossil fuel clothes, new made of virgin fossil fuels anymore in Frome. And in fact, Frome Wardrobe Collective has become financially sustainable and is unlocking everything. It is unlocking all those clothes out of everybody's wardrobe because the town council has made it, supported the Frome Wardrobe Collective to make this possible. And so everybody's sharing. There's a levy, though, that's involved. So there's a small amount of money which is raised because, of course, we can't just stop production and forget about the workers, not just in manufacture, but also in cotton and polyester. So there's a levy that redistributes some of the money on top of the taxation of all of the major companies, which are now completely changing in workers' hands anyway. I think I had one other part of it. And there's new industry in Frome as well. So Frome, of course, has got a history of textiles and dyeing in particular, but there's also, everyone's on universal basic income anyway, but you've got collection and sorting and repair industries all happening, and Frome is seen as a model for the rest of the country, as inspiring everybody else.
We don't have to worry.
Yeah, so how do we get there? So basically, everybody needs pockets. Forgot that bit. It's just been so inspiring to everybody else. In the coming 10 years, there's been all of these initiatives. Some work, some don't work, and different things meet different people's needs, and that's basically what's inspired all the change to happen.
Guys, that's not what I want to go there now. I don't know about you. Can we just skip forward 10 years, please? That would be fantastic. Okay, let me just have a look at the list. Okay, so we have got a few minutes left. So I'm going to skip to my last question. This is our call to action. If you were to suggest just 2 things that the audience members can do to be radical in their approach going forward, what would they be? Amelia?
One is, I've lost it already. I know the second one because it's quite selfish, so Frome's really active in terms of what we're doing. We've worked together for years now, haven't we? I think it's at least 2 years, if not more. But 2 years ago, that's right, 2.5 years ago, Sustainable Fashion Week almost got a mention in Parliament because of MBS storage in Scotland. blah, blah, blah. And the point is, I think if enough people connect, then the amplification of all those voices does have power, and it does have potential power for policy as well, which is what, in the back of my mind, what I would love to see happening is that as citizens join together and make lots of noise, actually that can shift, how DEFRA responds to the waste crisis when it comes to textiles. So it's all very hopeful, but selfishly I would like your radical act to be, there's one that I've forgotten that I'll help you remember, and the second one is tell your friends that aren't in Frome, who are in Barnsley or Tower Hamlets or North Wales, all around the country to get involved in some way or another in a way that works for them and is sustainable for them financially and in terms of their energy and time. But tell them to get involved, and I think the more people we can get together, the better resource we all are, and the more we can have, become a collective resource to the fashion industry, as it should be, and to each other. And I promise you I'll come up with something in time that's very professional. By second hand.
So, number one is acquire no more than 5 items of new clothing in the next year. You can swap things as well. But there's a caveat to this, which is that you also have to give all the money that you haven't spent on clothes to a labour rights organisation, because this is deadly serious. The labour rights organisations are dramatically losing funding. They really, like no other time before, and I can't emphasise this enough, like no other time before, money is needed to support labour rights organisations. The Clothes Campaign has had major funding cuts. It's doing so much work on trying to raise money. So I am serious. Please give your money, make a regular donation to them, but also your time. So all the time that you're not spending shopping, even in charity shops, I know this, you also put the time into doing some other action. So that's one. And then my second one is that you go to Labour Behind the Label website, at very minimum sign a petition about the next factory closure in Sri Lanka, this unionised factory, the only unionised factory that Next have. Because it's so important that we tell them that these unionised factories are so rare and so few and far between that we cannot afford as a society to lose them. It's so important. So at a minimum sign a petition, but ideally write to Next, write to the MP and get them to raise it in Parliament. It really is so serious, I think. Thank you.
A lot has been said already. I think the first thing is get involved in your local community, and I think probably many of you here are. And through that, we need to be building these non-growth based systems that are self-provisioning. But I think we shouldn't use that as a way to kind of escape into our locality. We have to remember the big global systems, and how do we fight that? We can support unions. We can support debt cancellation, we can support demilitarisation. There's so many different things we can do, but I think there's the two elements. One is local, building community. We have to have cohesion between people. We have to have coalitions, and then the big global structures. It seems impossible to fight, but we have to try.
Yeah, thank you. What I really love about all of the ideas that you guys have put forward is that considering that most people, when asked what their barrier to sustainable fashion is, they say that it's cost. Nearly all the things you mentioned here are either free or very low cost, or they save you money. So I think that's a really interesting thing to know. Okay, so I think, yeah, we're going to go on to the Q&A. Okay, and then the clothing choices afterwards. Okay. Okay, folks, so we now have a little bit of time, just keep an eye on the clock, for a Q&A. So does anybody have a question for any of our speakers here this evening? I know know some of you do, because some of you have posed them to me and I've gone, oh, just save them for the speakers in the Q&A.
Excuse me, I'd just like to know what the name of the book was, or the woman that's really, I didn't quite catch it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's Joanna Macy, and the work that she does is called The Work That Reconnects. And so it's Joanna Macy, M-A-C-Y. There's also a book, Active Hope, but it's mostly work that involves getting together with other people to acknowledge the despair and the grief and challenges of doing activism and coming through to a point of active hope.
Thank you.
Well, there was a question that young man here.
Amelia, oh god, that's quite loud. Amelia, what is your, if you could summarise sustainable fashion in one word, what would it be?
It's not going to be brief, sorry, it's only one word. I wrote once, very dry, but sustainability is a word that's overused, poorly used, misused, abused. It's a terrible word, the word sustainable. And it's still, in some ways, the perfect word for everything in life. It's something that can be continued indefinitely without causing harm. That's the definition of sustainability, which is quite dry, but I like because it's people now talk about regeneration and etc., but you can't sustain anything without regeneration anyway. You can't sustain anything without feeding it and watering it and nourishing it and nurturing it. So for me, there you go. It's not one word, it's fun, but it is many words that say the same thing.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Anna?
Question for Liz, but also open to everyone. We are in a room full of a lot of white and white-presenting people, and I'm curious to know, in our sort of radical work, how can we reach audiences of the global majority?
You've got 30 seconds now.
I don't know. I honestly don't know how to do it. I'm trying to think of something that's even wise enough for me to say. I think we have to. Anybody else got anything immediate to say? Sort of. Yeah. Okay.
I think there's a lot, because this is the question at a single event that we ask every year, every day, is the people we talk to are often an echo chamber, and it's often primarily white middle class women. And as a white middle class woman, I feel like I'm often the wrong person to head up my own business, because we need different faces and different voices collectively to speak on behalf of this, and to share collective experience from a real variety of different viewpoints. And I think I want to caveat this before I say this, because I don't think I should be speaking about this because I don't know, because I can't speak to that experience. But I think another huge barrier when it comes to shifting fashion habits is transgenerational embedded experiences. So it's the green sector broadly is one of the least diverse sectors, and whether that's, I say green sector, that's sustainability in transport or food or all these different ways. Sustainability is like one of the least, or if not the least, diverse sector in the UK. And I think it's really, really hard that loads of often privileged middle class white people are telling other people from marginalised backgrounds, lower income backgrounds, what they should be doing. And I think there's an embedded experience that is transgenerational over many, many, many generations, which is impacting how people want to behave and how people want to spend their money. And I think it's really, really deep, complex and problematic. And I think the first step and the best thing is to try and ensure that we've got a real multiplicity of voices talking here. And again, we don't want to educate, we want to share knowledge, share experience, because culturally, geographically, socioeconomically, we're going to have so much, our collective understanding of what needs to happen will be so much richer if it has many, many voices bringing knowledge to the table. And that's really hard to do, but it's something we need to constantly strive to do. And a single thread is looking at a bit of research as to why, who's participating in what we do, and why, and who's missing out of the conversation and what we need to do.
Sorry, I needed a moment to think. So I think there's a few things in your question actually that I think we need to address. The fact is that the global majority haven't caused this massive problem. They've been repressed and impoverished because of it. Secondly, people in the global majority are fighting. They are struggling so hard to address the injustices that they face and to do it in dignity. And that is so key. My third thought is that as somebody who is white and has all this kind of ability, access to resources and that I actually have the responsibility to act in solidarity to other people and not to expect other people to come into my space. So, and that's actually quite, I think, one of the biggest challenges is to say, it's not about necessarily having more diversity here, it's actually how do I enable, support, not claim the space that other people can and would take if it was possible, and what do I need to do to relinquish some of that access to resource or power, whatever it is, to enable those other initiatives to happen. And then my final point is that we also have to remember that the global majority are acting and doing their own sustainability actions in relation to clothing, so not just about fighting injustice, but also in relation to their clothing behaviours as well. And there's so much for me to learn.
I mean, those are really excellent points that have been made. I would say I recently went to a degrowth conference in Oslo, and degrowth is really all about decolonisation. That is the heart of the issue. And yet I found people from the global south who had made it there all the way to Oslo were angry and upset because of the lack of representation of their ideas. In that, at the heart of that, you have this problem of needing to de-link. That we have to kind of break those, these kind of chains that allow the extraction to happen. And we need to build new types of relationships. And unfortunately, even though this should really be the heart of the problem of degrowth, I believe it, and this is what people were saying at the conference, it's not getting the attention it needs. And what we have instead is a lot of people talking about how do we escape into a commune or whatever, to take a kind of, that's maybe kind of an extreme, but I'm creating a caricature, but this is how they see it, that we're all talking about how do we escape, and really that still leaves the global majority in a very precarious situation. So yeah, I don't have a kind of silver bullet, but there's a lot more that needs to be talked about.
Thank you. that feels like a massive area. That's a really good question, Rosa. Thank you. I think we could have done a whole evening just on that, really, couldn't we?
Hazel, can I ask, am I allowed or not?
Should we do one more question? Yeah. Okay, go on then, James.
Okay, the question is, so I run the Climate Film Festival, so as part of our global outreach, we got over 1,150 films from 100 countries, so I'm trying to connect people and all of their activity linked to climate environment globally. So my concern is, this is a societal change. This is a step change that you need to provide jobs, pensions for those who will lose their job as we transition into the future. So I guess the challenge is, personally, which is what I'm working on and trying to link with others, is how do we create our voice together? Fashion and others is one voice. Film and others to make it visible is another. The musicians, we support it. We all have a voice, but I can't see any forum at the moment where we all come together. So instead of having hundreds of thousands, we've then got tens of millions, if not billions, across the world, protecting either those working in the different industries which all relate to this problem that we all need to address. So somewhere we need to, as far as I'm concerned, which is part of my mission, we need to connect and join, because then we do have the power. We will tell the politicians what to do. They won't be telling us, because we won't do as they request. They need to. Remember, they're employed by us.
Yeah.
They work for us.
Indeed, that's another really good question, James. I think it's already been mentioned on the stage this evening about the power of the collective voice. Does anybody have anything to say in reply to James? No, just do it. There you go, James.
Well, I'm on a mission. I'm quite happy to connect, but we need to, don't we? Otherwise it won't change.
We do.
And we get picked off. And just one element to that was linked to a TV channel that we also don't have as a voice. There is no voice.
Can I just quickly say
Yeah.
that there were virtually no films. I was one of the judges in the Twine Film Festival. There were no judges, no films about fashion and the state.
Yeah, the last 2 years there have been either little or no films about fashion. So the group that we're engaged with across 100 countries, if the stories aren't coming out, as I mentioned to one of the other panelists, maybe it's through TikTok, maybe it's through other routes, but collectively, it's a bit like when we talk about Next. I would like a banner outside their shop to say, don't shop here because. So we should be, because it isn't visible to the public walking around day to day, which is the challenge, isn't it?
There's spaces for films to come
Yes, yeah.
and enter into the Climate Film Festival. So if you know anybody that wants to make a film about this issue, please get them to do it and send it in.
Yeah. Good information.
I also don't want people not to shop in Next. Because these jobs that these workers have got is really key. Yeah.
It's a very delicate balance, isn't it?
It is.
It's a delicate balance, doing the activism, supporting the people, and not destroying.
Yeah.
Next had the union, we need to also encourage that,
Okay, we are running very short of time indeed. We were going to do some of the clothing stories. Are we still going to do?
Yeah, we can. It's 9 o'clock. We're aware that we're due to finish at 9, so if people do need to leave, don't be shy about that. If you want to go, please go.
We won't be offended.
We won't, but we'll carry on a little bit. So if you want to stay, then you're very welcome to, and we'll do a little bit of. I'll bring this.
Yes, please do. So each of the panelists chose an item of clothing from our lovely exhibition at the back there. If you haven't had a look yet, please do go and have a quick look before you leave. Some people in the audience and from the Frome Wardrobe Collective and amongst our volunteers have very kindly brought in very personally valuable items of clothing, and they have shared their stories with us. Okay. Okay, who chose the little white vest mended with Granny's favourite hanky? That was you.
This is a charity shop find I literally wore to pieces and inspired me to try visible mending. I decided this would be my first challenge, probably the hardest mend in the pile. I am proud of what I have managed. It has been very It has been very thin fabric to work with, and the most singular weight of fabric I found to mend it with was one of my deceased granny's clean hankies. I think I remember it from being one of her favourites. She had quite a big nose for a lady and had to blow it quite a lot. The mend is almost complete until it probably inevitably wears again, but I love the thought of it potentially being more hanky mended than original material down the line. Jo, member of Frome Wardrobe Collective.
Okay, and the t-shirt. We chose the t-shirt.
Chosen because I've got t-shirts like this. So each of my siblings wore this t-shirt for hand-me-downs. It's such a long legacy, I just can't let it go. Whose is it? This is somebody in.
It's mine.
She still wears it.
I'm not lifting that one up. My art apron. I wore this all through art college, printing, gluing, painting. Prior to that, this apron lived another life. My mum used it every day in her flower shop. I always loved the symmetry of her wet hands and my paint-covered hands making the same paths. Oh, it's lovely. I love those stories. They're wonderful, and for me, endlessly fascinating as well. Okay, thank you for reading those. So I think that brings us to a close for the evening, but before we all go, we have some thank yous that we need to share. So first of all, a very big thank you to the gorgeous venue that we're in, to Trinity. A huge thank you to Future Shed. They've helped us with some of the funding for this evening, which has been very much appreciated. A huge thank you to our speakers. Please give them a massive round of applause. Thank you to the lovely Nicola and to Will and Joe and Lady Lalu as well for sharing your beautiful music with us all. I was entranced. To our wonderful volunteers, without whom FWC would struggle to put on these events by ourselves. We're only four. Thank you, volunteers. And also, finally, to yourselves for coming along and joining us this evening. On a Tuesday evening, which seems really random, but it's Spring Festival and anything can happen. So thank you for trickling out here on a Tuesday evening and joining us, to you all. And thank you to the lovely Mandy as well for sharing your gorgeous poem about your mum's dress as well. It's all combined together, I'm sure you'll agree, in a rather splendid evening. So yeah, thank you again. And lovely. But nearly forgot, to James for providing me filming this evening. He does such a splendid job. Thank you, James.
No problem.
Excellent, thank you so much. If you don't already follow Frome Wardrobe Collective on Instagram, then please do. Like I said, we have got our next clothes swap coming up in September as part of Sustainable Fashion Week. We're very much looking forward to that. We haven't done one this year yet, so it's going to be exciting.
Be radical.
Yes, yes. And before you go, if you haven't yet had a look at the board and the questions on the board and done your stickering and your post-it tin, that's the thing, then please do. Thank you, guys.
You've got to do it before people take it.